The storm raged outside Outpost 7, sheets of crimson rain hammering against reinforced windows as Marcus Chen made his final checks on the facility's shield generators. The colonial outpost, perched on the edge of human space, wasn't much to look at. Just a collection of prefab structures and power arrays huddled against the perpetual tempest of New Darwin's atmosphere. But it was home, at least for now. Marcus wiped condensation from his diagnostic panel, frowning at the readouts. The generators were holding, but barely. Another 10% drop in efficiency, and they'd all be breathing toxic air. He keyed his comm. Control, we need to divert more power to the eastern array. She's starting to buckle. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong in the howling wind and drumming rain. A crystalline resonance, like someone running a wet finger around the rim of an enormous wine glass. The sound grew louder, accompanied by a flickering in the crimson clouds above. Something massive broke through the storm cover, a creature unlike anything in humanity's xenobiology database. Its body was formed of interlocking crystal planes that shifted and flowed like liquid glass, wings spread wider than a shuttle's wingspan. Lightning crawled across its crystalline surface as it descended, clearly wounded, one wing trailing fragments that shattered against the shield barrier. Marcus's training told him to sound the alarm, to call in colonial defense. But something in the creature's movements spoke of intelligence, of desperation. It was seeking shelter, not hunting prey. Without conscious thought, he found himself reaching for the shield controls. "Chen, what are you doing?" Control's voice crackled through his comm. "Unknown entity approaching. Lock down your sector." "Belay that," Marcus replied, fingers dancing across the console. "I'm creating a temporary aperture. Whatever that is, it's injured. We can't just leave it out there to die." "That's not your call to make." The voice cut off as Marcus muted his comm. He'd face the consequences later. Right now, something, needed help. The shield rippled, creating a carefully calculated opening just large enough for the crystal being to pass through. It banked sharply, crystalline wings catching the facility's lights in rainbow refractions, and landed with surprising grace given its injuries. Up close, Marcus could see that parts of its structure were cracked, leaking a luminescent fluid that seemed to evaporate on contact with the air. The creature's head turned toward him, faceted eyes studying him with alien intensity. Then it spoke, its voice resonating directly in Marcus's mind, each word accompanied by harmonic overtones that made his teeth ache. "I am Wyrith," the beam proclaimed, "last crystalline archon of the 7th resonance, and I require your assistance, human engineer." Marcus found himself stepping forward, engineering mind already cataloging the creature's injuries, calculating potential repairs. "I'm Marcus Chen, and I think we'd better get you inside before Control sends out the defense drones." The crystal dragon, there was no better word for it, inclined its head in what might have been amusement. "Your species' reputation for adaptability is well earned. Most would run screaming from a being such as myself. Most haven't spent 5 years keeping this outpost's systems running with duct tape and optimism," Marcus replied, leading the way to his workshop. "After a while, the impossible becomes just another Tuesday." Inside, under the harsh industrial lighting, Wyrith's injuries looked even worse. The crack in his wing structure was spreading, threatening to shatter the delicate crystalline lattice entirely. Marcus grabbed his diagnostic scanner, more out of habit than any real hope it would work on alien crystal biology. To his surprise, the scanner actually provided useful data. The crystalline structure wasn't just mineral. It was a complex matrix of living crystal shot through with channels of energy that seemed to function like a nervous system. The damage was interfering with these energy flows, causing cascade failures throughout Wyrith's body. "Fascinating," Marcus muttered, already reaching for his tools. "Your entire structure is one giant semiconductor, isn't it? These energy channels, they're like biological fiber optics." "Your grasp of my nature is impressive," Wyrith replied, the harmonics in his voice taking on a warmer tone. But I require more than simple repairs. I need a way to return home, to the crystal spheres. My own ship was destroyed in the attack that left me in this state. Marcus looked up from his scanner, meeting those faceted eyes. You need me to build you a ship, one capable of handling your unique biology. Yes, one that can traverse the spaces between realities where my people dwell. I know it is much to ask, but I have observed your species. You build wonders from scraps, create possibilities where none existed before. Will you help me, Marcus Chen? It was crazy, impossible. The kind of project that could end his career or revolutionize human understanding of spaceflight. Marcus grinned. Well, it beats calibrating shield generators in the rain. But first, let's stop you from falling apart. As Marcus began his initial repairs, neither human nor dragon noticed the strange resonance building in the crystalline fragments scattered across the workshop floor. A resonance that would soon change everything. 3 months had passed since Wyreth's arrival, and Marcus's workshop had transformed into something out of a fever dream. Holographic blueprints flickered across every surface, depicting impossible geometries that seemed to fold in on themselves. Half-finished components littered the workbenches, each one a fusion of human engineering and crystal technology that defied conventional physics. Marcus stood before his latest prototype, dark circles under his eyes testament to another sleepless night. The power core he'd designed pulsed with an inner light, crystal lattices grown from Wyreth's shed fragments interfacing with quantum circuits in ways that shouldn't be possible. He'd thought he knew something about impossible engineering before, but working with Wyreth had opened his eyes to entirely new dimensions of the craft. The resonance patterns are stabilizing, Wyreth observed, his crystalline form casting prismatic patterns across the workshop walls. Your adaptation of my people's technology is remarkable. Thanks, Marcus replied, adjusting a connection. Though I still don't understand half of what I'm building. These energy signatures, they don't match anything in our physics models. It's like the power core is drawing energy from somewhere else entirely. The spaces between realities are rich with potential, Wyreth said, his harmonic voice carefully neutral. Your species has barely scratched the surface of what's possible. Marcus nodded absently, but something in Wyreth's tone made him pause. Over the past months, he'd learned to read the subtle variations in his friend's crystalline harmonics. There was something there, a discordant note that didn't quite fit. He turned to his computer terminal, pulling up the latest sensor readings. The energy signatures from the power core were becoming stronger, more complex. But there was a pattern emerging in the data, one that tickled something in his memory. I need to check something, he told Wyreth, diving into the Outpost archaeological database. Humanity had encountered plenty of ancient ruins in their expansion across the stars, including some covered in crystalline technology. He'd dismissed the similarities at first, but now, there, in the ruins of the Epsilon system, researchers had found warning glyphs. The translations were rough, but they spoke of crystal beings who walked between worlds, beings who had brought both wonders and devastation. The glyphs showed ships similar to what he was building, but they weren't just ships, they were weapons. Marcus, Wyreth's voice carried an edge now. Is something wrong? No, Marcus lied, closing the database, just cross-referencing some power calculations. His mind raced. The ship they were building wasn't just capable of traversing realities, it could tear them apart. And Wyreth had guided every step of its construction, his suggestions subtle but deliberate. The containment field is fluctuating, Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. I'll need to run some additional tests before we proceed. Probably take a few days. Wyreth's crystalline form shifted, faceted eyes studying Marcus intently. Of course, precision is essential in work such as this. Though I had hoped, no matter, take the time you need. That night, after Wyreth had retired to his specially constructed chamber, Marcus dug deeper into the archaeological records. The stories were fragmented, scattered across a dozen dead civilizations, but a pattern emerged. The crystal beings had appeared to many species, always seeking help to build their ships, always claiming to be refugees, exiles, last survivors. And always, those civilizations had vanished shortly after the ships were completed. Marcus stared at his reflection in the workshop window, the storm outside matching his turbulent thoughts. He'd come to genuinely like Wyrith, to consider him a friend. Their conversations about engineering and physics had opened his mind to entirely new possibilities. But now he had to face the possibility that it had all been manipulation, a carefully crafted deception. The power core pulsed behind him, its light seeming somehow colder now. He poured his heart and soul into this project, pushed the boundaries of human engineering to places he never dreamed possible. And in doing so, he might have helped create something terrible. A proximity alert flashed on his terminal. Someone approaching. The workshop. Marcus quickly cleared his screen, but not before catching one final translation from the ancient warnings. Beware the song of broken crystals, for it heralds the shattering of worlds. The workshop door slid open, revealing Wyrith's crystalline form backlit by the corridor lights. Still working so late, my friend? You know me. Marcus forced a smile. Can't sleep when there's a problem to solve. Indeed. Wyrith moved into the workshop, crystal surfaces catching and refracting the light in hypnotic patterns. I've been thinking about the containment field issues. Perhaps if we adjusted the resonance frequencies. Marcus nodded, playing along, all too aware of the ancient warnings lurking in his terminal's memory. The ship was nearly complete. Soon, he would have to make a choice. Trust in his friend, or trust in the dire warnings of long-dead civilizations. And if he chose wrong, the consequences would be beyond catastrophic. Tell me more about your home, he said carefully, watching Wyrith's reactions. About the crystal spheres you're trying to return to. Something flickered in Wyrith's faceted eyes. Nostalgia? Guilt? Or simply the calculation of what story to tell next? It is difficult to describe in terms your language can encompass. Imagine a place where reality itself is crystalline, where thought and matter are one. Sounds beautiful, Marcus said, and dangerous. All beautiful things are dangerous, my friend. Wyrith's harmonics carried an edge of what might have been sadness, just as all dangerous things can be beautiful. You understand this, don't you? The duality of creation. Marcus thought of the power core they'd built together, of its potential for both wonder and devastation. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I do. The ship loomed in the center of the workshop, its crystalline hull seamlessly blending organic and mechanical components. Marcus ran his hand along its surface, feeling the subtle vibrations of power coursing through the structure. After 4 months of work, it was nearly complete, and that thought filled him with equal parts pride and dread. He'd spent the last week secretly modifying the ship's systems, adding layers of safeguards and kill switches that even Wyrith's crystalline senses shouldn't be able to detect. The ancient warnings kept him awake at night, driving him to work faster, smarter, trying to find a solution that wouldn't end in betrayal. Your modifications exceed all expectations. Wyrith's harmonic voice resonated through the workshop. The crystalline dragon emerged from the shadows, his form somehow larger than Marcus remembered, crackling with barely contained energy. The integration of quantum matrices with crystalline resonators, truly remarkable. Thanks, Marcus replied, careful to keep his voice neutral. Though I still have questions about the power distribution system. These energy spikes we're seeing, they're not just about propulsion, are they? Wyrith's faceted eyes studied him for a long moment. You've been researching the ancient ruins, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Had to understand the underlying principles. Marcus shrugged, heart pounding. Interesting stuff in those old databases. Lots of warnings about crystal ships and shattered worlds. Propaganda. Wyrith's harmonics carried a sharp edge, spread by those who feared what they couldn't understand. My people sought only to expand the boundaries of what was possible, by destroying entire civilizations. Marcus turned to face his friend, dropping the pretense. The evidence is pretty clear, Wyreth. Every world that helped build ships like this one vanished shortly after, torn apart at the quantum level. The crystal dragon's form shifted, planes of light refracting in complex patterns. You cannot comprehend the scope of what we attempted. Reality itself is crystalline in nature, capable of being reshaped by those with sufficient understanding. Yes, some worlds were lost, but in service of a greater purpose. What purpose? Marcus demanded. What could possibly justify that kind of destruction? Evolution. Wyreth's voice resonated with terrible certainty. The universe is stagnant, trapped in patterns that prevent true growth. My people sought to break those patterns, to force reality itself to evolve. The ship you've helped me build isn't just a vessel. It's a catalyst for change on a cosmic scale. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. And what happens to Earth, to humanity, when you trigger this evolution? Some would survive. The strongest, the most adaptable. Your species has shown remarkable potential. That's why I chose you, Marcus. You could be part of something greater than yourself. By helping you destroy everything I care about. Marcus shook his head. That's not evolution, Wyreth. It's genocide on a universal scale. The crystal dragon's form crackled with energy, his voice taking on harmonics that made Marcus's teeth ache. I had hoped you would understand. That your human curiosity, your drive to push boundaries, would help you see the necessity of what must be done. I understand plenty, Marcus replied, fingers hovering near the hidden control panel he'd installed. I understand that power without compassion is just destruction. That evolution without preservation is just chaos. Pretty words. Wyreth's crystalline form expanded, filling the workshop with refracting light. But they change nothing. The ship is nearly complete. The resonance patterns are already building. Even if you refuse to help, I can finish it myself. Marcus smiled grimly. You really should have paid more attention to those system modifications I made. He pressed the hidden panel, activating the kill switches he'd spent weeks integrating into the ship's crystalline matrix. Nothing happened. Wyreth's harmonic laughter filled the workshop. Did you think I wouldn't notice your attempts at sabotage? Every modification you made only strengthened the ship's true purpose. Your human ingenuity, turned against you by your own hands. The ship's power core pulsed with increasing intensity, crystal surfaces beginning to vibrate at frequencies that made reality itself seem to waver. Marcus backed away, mind racing through options. He'd failed to stop Wyreth directly. But maybe there was another way. You're right about one thing, he said, edging toward his workbench. Human ingenuity is remarkable. We're really good at learning from our mistakes. His hand found the small device he prepared as a last resort. For instance, I learned that crystalline beings like yourself have one major weakness. And what would that be? Wyreth asked, more amused than concerned. Resonance cascade failures. Marcus activated the device, sending out a precisely calibrated frequency that he derived from studying Wyreth's injured wing months ago. Get too many conflicting frequencies going at once. The crystal dragon's form shuddered, patterns of light becoming chaotic. What? What have you done? Bought us some time, Marcus replied, already running for the workshop's main console. And maybe a chance to fix this without anyone else dying. Alarms blared throughout Outpost 7 as the resonance cascade tore through Wyreth's crystalline form. The dragon thrashed, his body sending out waves of discordant energy that shattered equipment and cracked reinforced walls. The ship's power core pulsed in sympathy, its carefully tuned frequencies becoming dangerously unstable. Marcus raced through emergency protocols at the main console, trying to contain the chaos he'd unleashed. The resonance device had worked better than he'd expected, and that was becoming a serious problem. If Wyreth's structure completely destabilized, the resulting energy release could tear apart half the continent. You don't understand what you're destroying. Wyreth's voice was distorted, harmonics fracturing. The work of millennia. The chance to break free from the prison of conventional physics. Pretty sure I understand exactly what I'm destroying, Marcus replied, fingers flying across controls. The question is whether I can save you in the process. A new alarm cut through the cacophony. Perimeter breach warnings. Multiple ships were approaching the outpost, their energy signatures unlike anything in the Colonial Defense Database. The workshop's external cameras showed crystalline vessels, similar in design to the one Marcus had helped build but far more aggressive in their configuration. Your people? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Wyrith's laughter was painful to hear, crystal fragments falling from his form with each sound. Not mine. The ones who prevented our work before, who trapped us in unchanging patterns. The lattice guard, reality's immune system, come to eliminate the perceived infection. The nearest crystalline ship opened fire, lance-like beams of coherent energy slicing through the outpost's shields like they weren't there. Marcus diverted power to secondary barriers, buying them seconds at most. If they breach the workshop, Wyrith warned, they will destroy everything. The ship, my research, any trace that could lead to understanding the true nature of reality. And they will not care how many humans die in the process. Marcus looked at his friend. And despite everything, Wyrith was still at. Beneath the lies and manipulation, there had been real friendship in their work together, real joy in pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The Crystal Dragon was a fanatic, yes, but one driven by a genuine desire to break free of universal constraints. These lattice guard, Marcus said, mind racing through possibilities. They enforce the current laws of physics. Make sure nothing evolves beyond accepted parameters. Yes, Wyrith's voice was weaker now, the resonance cascade eating away at his structure. They are the universe's antibodies, eliminating anything that threatens its stable state. They cannot be reasoned with or defeated. Believe me, we tried. Another blast rocked the workshop, emergency barriers failing one by one. Marcus stared at the ship they'd built together, seeing it with new eyes. Maybe you were going about it wrong, he muttered, fighting the universe head-on instead of working with it. He ran to the ship's access panel, making rapid adjustments to systems he'd helped design. Your people tried to force evolution through destruction. But what if there's another way? What if we could create change that the universe accepts instead of rejects? Impossible, Wyrith said, but there was a note of uncertainty in his harmonics. The patterns are too rigid, too deeply encoded in reality itself. Reality isn't rigid, Marcus replied, remembering countless repairs made with duct tape and improvisation. It's adaptive. The laws of physics aren't prison bars. They're more like guidelines that can bend if you approach them the right way. The ship's power core responded to his modifications, its crystalline matrices realigning into new configurations. The energy patterns shifted from destructive resonance to something more subtle, more harmonious with the underlying fabric of spacetime. What are you doing? Wyrith asked, his own structure beginning to stabilize as the resonance cascade subsided. Creating a bridge instead of a battering ram, Marcus explained, not slowing his work. The ship isn't going to break reality. It's going to gently expand it. Show the universe new possibilities without triggering its immune response. A massive blast shook the entire facility. The lattice guard ships were through the outer defenses, their weapons powering up for a final strike. Marcus looked at the readouts from his modifications, then at Wyrith. I need you to trust me, he said, like I trusted you when you first arrived. Can you do that? The Crystal Dragon's faceted eyes studied him for a long moment. You continue to surprise me, Marcus Chen. Very well. Show me this other way you've discovered. Marcus activated the modified ship systems just as the lattice guard opened fire. Energy flooded the workshop, but instead of the destructive resonance Wyrith had planned, it created something entirely new. A field of gently expanding possibility, pushing the boundaries of physics without breaking them. The workshop blazed with light as reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Marcus's modifications had transformed the ship from a weapon of destruction into something entirely new, a catalyst for controlled evolution. The energy field it generated spread outward in gentle waves, each pulse subtly expanding the possibilities of what physics would allow. The lattice guard's weapons fire met this field and changed. Their coherent energy beams didn't so much dissipate as transform, their destructive potential converted into pure possibility. The crystalline ships themselves began to resonate with the new frequencies, their rigid structures becoming more fluid, more adaptive. Remarkable. Wyrith's voice had regained its strength, his own form stabilizing as it integrated with the field. You found a way to create change without destruction, to expand reality's parameters without triggering its defensive responses. Marcus monitored the readings carefully, making minute adjustments to maintain the delicate balance. The universe isn't your enemy, Wyrith. It's not a prison to break out of. It's more like a living thing that can grow and change if you give it the chance to adapt. Through the workshop's windows, they could see the lattice guard ships hanging motionless in the storm-torn sky. Their crystalline surfaces flickered with new patterns, as if they were processing this unexpected development. After what felt like an eternity, one of them transmitted a signal, not the expected attack, but a complex harmonic sequence. There, accepting the changes, Wyrith said, wonder evident in his harmonics. The new patterns aren't being rejected. How is this possible? Because we're not forcing anything, Marcus explained, pride mixing with relief in his voice. We're suggesting possibilities instead of demanding them, showing reality what it could become instead of trying to break it apart and rebuild it. The lattice guard ships began to move again, but not to attack. They took up positions around the workshop, their energy signatures shifting to match the harmonious frequencies Marcus had created. The storm outside calmed, the very atmosphere seeming to stabilize into new patterns. My people spent millennia trying to break free of universal constants. Wyrith moved closer to the ship, his crystalline form reflecting the transformed energies. We saw physics as a cage, stability as stagnation. We never considered that evolution could be cooperative rather than confrontational. That's the thing about being an engineer, Marcus said, running final checks on the systems. Sometimes the best solution isn't about having the most power or the cleverest design. It's about understanding how things want to work and helping them work better. A new signal came from the lattice guard ships, an invitation encoded in frequencies that spoke of change and possibility rather than rigid enforcement. Wyrith translated the complex harmonics. They're offering to help explore these new patterns, to guide the controlled evolution of reality's laws. Not as jailers, but as gardeners. Marcus smiled. Sounds like a better job than universal immune system. What do you think, friend? Ready to try changing the universe through cooperation instead of conquest? The crystal dragon's form shifted, catching light in new and beautiful ways. You've shown me a path I never imagined possible, Marcus Chen. My people sought to force reality to evolve, but you've proven that true evolution comes from understanding and adaptation. He turned his faceted eyes to the modified ship. This vessel is no longer a weapon. It's a seed for growing new possibilities. That's the funny thing about humanity, Marcus said, initiating the ship's launch sequence. We're really good at finding third options when everyone else sees only two choices. Sometimes the best way to break rules is to show them how to bend instead. The ship rose from the workshop floor, its crystalline hull humming with harmonious energy. Around it, reality itself seemed to soften and expand, not breaking but growing into new configurations. The lattice guard ships moved in concert, their once rigid patterns flowing into more dynamic forms. There are still so many boundaries to explore, Wyrith said, his voice carrying new purpose. So many possibilities we never considered because we were too focused on destruction as the path to change. Then let's explore them, Marcus replied. Not as enemies of reality, but as its partners in evolution. After all, he grinned, looking at the transformed ship that represented both human ingenuity and crystalline wisdom. That's what engineers do. We find ways to make impossible things possible. The ship's energy field pulsed one final time, sending ripples of possibility across the cosmos. In that moment, Marcus knew they had created something unprecedented, not just a new technology, but a new way of thinking about the very nature of reality and change. The universe wasn't a prison to escape or an enemy to defeat. It was a partner in the endless dance of evolution and growth. And sometimes, it took a human with a roll of duct tape and a crazy idea to show ancient beings that the simplest solutions were often the best ones.